Okay, so it is May 11th, 2018, and the petitions to run for governor here in the state of Michigan have been filed. The candidates are locked in, and over the next 2 months and a few weeks, they're going to battle it out all over the great state of Michigan. This is going to be a two-part series because, as you know, the current Michigan governor, one tough nerd, Rick Snyder, is term limited, and thank the Lord for that because he's been a disaster. But anyways, we're getting rid of the nerd, and hopefully, at least in my opinion, we're going to get a Democrat back in office because my personal opinion is the people on the Republican side are somewhat similar or a lot like Snyder. But anyways, in the interest of fairness, what I'm going to do here in part one is I'm going to break down the Democratic candidates for governor this year, and then later on in a different episode, I will break down the Republicans for part two for those of you listeners out there who prefer the conservative side. So, who are the Democrats who are running?
I'm Gretchen Whitmer. Like a lot of people in Michigan, I was brought up to work hard. My first job was at Burlingame Lumber. I stocked the shelves at Target, and I worked the line at the Royal Fork Buffet. In high school, I played sports at Forest Hill Central. My dream was to be an ESPN anchor. Okay, so that didn't happen. I'm the mom of two, stepmom to three, chemistry, wife of a small business owner, and the household quarterback for everyone. I was also the first woman elected as a leader in the Michigan Senate, where I took on the tough fights, like negotiating with Republicans to expand Medicaid, giving 680,000 people coverage through Healthy Michigan, pushing through an increase in the minimum wage, and fighting to stop Governor Snyder's cuts to education and his corporate tax giveaways. I was also the Ingham County prosecutor brought in to clean the place up after a scandal. You're probably wondering, why is she telling me all this stuff? Well, I'm running for governor because in the state that invented the middle class, too many families haven't had a pay raise in years. Because I'm tired of seeing corporations get more tax breaks while you get hit with a retirement tax. Because I've had it with Republicans like Donald Trump blowing up health care while your costs go up and up. And because we need a governor who's serious about fixing our roads and putting people to work to do it. I want you to know I'll work with everyone who wants to solve these problems, and I'll take on anyone who stands in our way. It's time to get some things done right now that will make your life better right now. As governor, I'll be in your corner.
I am Shri Thanedar, and I'm running for governor.
Shri is just like me.
I am an immigrant, and some people tell me I have an accent.
Shri is just like me.
But with my ideas to fix our roads,
Shri is just like me.
Improve our public schools,
Shri is just like me.
Create good jobs and ensure health care for all,
Shri is just like me.
We are actually more alike than you think.
It's like looking in a mirror.
Shri Thanedar, the most progressive.
When I rebuilt Detroit's health department, we stood up to some of the biggest corporate polluters in the state, and we made sure that our kids weren't exposed to lead in their schools. I learned then that politicians' doors don't open for people like you and me. They only open for the corporate paychecks that they take in. Who here believes that we need new blood in places like Lansing and D.C.? That we can have the kind of Michigan that dignifies all of us? Who here is committing today to join the People's Summer?
Well, you have former Senate Minority Leader and former Senator, also former prosecutor for Ingham County, Gretchen Whitmer, who actually served in the Michigan Senate as Senate Minority Leader when myself and DJ Yokoro were working in the Senate for our state senator in the Flint area, John Gleason. So Gretchen is running, and she has locked in the support of pretty much all of labor. Then you have scientist and former pharmaceutical company CEO Shri Thanedar, who says he's the most progressive of the Democrats, that are running. He supports single payer, which I think all of them running probably do. And it sounds like that they are all for legalization of marijuana and several things that you would expect from Democratic candidates. So Shri is running, and then the third person running is former Detroit Health Department Director and Dr. Abdul Sayeed, who is a graduate of the University of Michigan, doctor and an up-and-coming leader. He also is a former staff member for current Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan. Then you have a fourth candidate who is running who, to be honest with you, I know next to nothing about other than his name, and his name is Bill Cobbs, which he's only, I think last poll he was polling at like 2.5%, and to be quite honest with you, with a name like Bill Cobbs that nobody knows, and it's sounding a little bit like Bill Cosby, good luck to you, sir. All right, so what it's worth, what was the latest polling in the Democratic race for governor? Well, it was a little surprising because the latest poll, which was a couple weeks ago now, and was in the Detroit News, had scientist Shri Thanedar in the lead over former state senator and Senate Minority Leader Gretchen Whitmer. It was a very slim lead of 26.9% to Whitmer's 26.3%, for a difference which would be in the normal margin of error of only 3 percentage points. Now, former health department director and former member of Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan's administration, Abdul Sayeed, Dr. Sayeed, was polling at a distant third at only 6.6%. And as I said, Bill Cobbs was at 2.5%. Now, I expect that to probably change as they continue to put ads up on television and talk to the people across the state of Michigan. And, you know, also, as we know, the problem with polls, as we saw in the 2016 presidential race, is that, quite frankly, polls get it wrong. Sometimes they're just not right. And so that's why I said that, for what it's worth, that latest poll had Thanedar up. And the other thing was, this was a poll that was done by the Detroit Regional Chamber, and as we all know, traditionally most Chamber of Commerce is, at least traditionally, in different areas, are Republican leaning anyways. So the other reason why I say for what it's worth is because, like I said, the 2016 presidential election polls were dead wrong. They weren't even remotely right when it actually came to the people who voted. So, first of all, you know, the reason why these polls are wrong sometimes is because these polls are only as good as the questions asked. They're only as good as the people asking questions. They're only good as the sample size. For example, if this poll they had called, you know, Democratic primary voters, and that was it, or did they call all likely voters who are registered or lean Democrats, or did they call all registered voters who have ever voted in a primary Republican or Democrat? You got to kind of know what the criteria was, and then you also have to factor in sample size, which I'll get to in a minute. And so, you know, these are just some of the factors that go into these polls, and, you know, were they professional pollsters too, which, you know, campaigns could do their own polling, and they do it similar to a way that a polling company would, but they're definitely only going to be calling likely Democratic primary voters. Like, they're not going to waste time and resources in their campaign calling people who registered Republicans, because, quite frankly, that's a waste of time and money, because if these people have traditionally always voted Republican, then the chances of you getting them to switch, although it does happen, is probably very unlikely. And if you were going to get them to switch, it's probably the candidate themselves actually showing up at that person's door, not being called for a polling sample. So what did I mean when I'm talking about, the sampling size of the poll? Basically what I'm talking about here is how many people were called and asked whatever these questions were anyways. And in a state with somewhere between 9 and 10 million people, which was the 2017 number, I think was actually 9.962 million people to be exact. But with that many people in the state, how many of those people were actually called? And, obviously you didn't call all 9 million. You probably didn't even call even remotely that, because what they do is they take a number and project it. Well, this particular poll only called 400 people. So out of 9.962 million, you called 400 likely Democratic primary voters, I would assume. And again, I don't know that for sure, but that would make the most sense here. And so even if we go with the results of this early poll, and you have Shri Thanedar and former state senator, Senate Minority Leader Gretchen Whitmer within the margin of error of each other, still at 26.9% to 26.3%, and then with Sayeed at 6 and that other guy at like 2 or whatever, that's 34.5% of likely voters in this poll who are still undecided, and whose vote could, possibly still be won. Which makes sense because, one, it's quite early, even though the filing deadline has came and passed. But, the campaigns will really start to ramp up right about now, or at the end of May at the very latest. However, they've already kind of started taking shots at each other. And the Whitmer camp has actually, even though she appears to be trailing in that poll, she's actually locked down all of organized labor, which, even though somehow the state of Michigan, home of the sit-down strikers of 1937, home of labor, home of unions, somehow under the Snyder regime was turned to a right-to-work state. Even though all these things are true, the number of union households and union voters is still a nice block, and good to have that endorsement. Now, obviously, not every single working person necessarily follows the endorsement of whatever labor union they belong to. But for the most part, most people do, especially when you're looking at a candidate like for governor, which is directly affecting you and your family here in the state of Michigan, because you're going to want somebody that you can at least halfway trust someone. So, are those of us who know former Senator Whitmer and who are in the Whitmer camp ready to hit the panic button just yet? No, especially considering what I just said, that she's locked up all of labor and some other Democratic stronghold endorsements. Now, Thanedar has spent way more money already, even though Whitmer has raised more money. And so, he came up with ads on the internet and commercial ads on TV. But he's spending a lot of his own money where she's not necessarily started to spend the money that she's raised, which I assume will change soon, especially if he continues to lead in the polls going forward to the August primary. Now, even though El Sayeed is polling third, to me, he sounds like a better choice than Thanedar because if you listen, and you'll see his ads that I'm going to put on here, and put ads for all of them on here, and you'll be able to see. But if you listen to the way he talks and the things that he talks about and just the way he comes across, he just seems like a better candidate than Thanedar. Now, obviously, Dr. Abdul Sayeed is Muslim, and you would hope that in 2018 that wouldn't matter, especially in a place like the state of Michigan, where there's a tremendous Muslim population in Dearborn. But as we've seen through the Trump administration and through the way people have acted in the Trump administration and how that's trickled down to the general public, there's still racism out there, and there's still people who have this belief that, if you're a Muslim, then you can't love America and you're probably a terrorist and all this other bullshit. But, I'm going to tell you right now, if I didn't know Senator Whitmer personally, if I hadn't worked with her when myself and DJ Yacoral were in the state Senate when she was Senate Minority Leader, if I wasn't a member of a labor union and have seen her fight for working class people, basically if I just, didn't have this knowledge and relationship with her that I have already, I probably would be very likely to be voting for El Sayeed myself, just based on the way he comes across, the way he is with people, the work that he did when he was part of the health department, and being a U of M guy. He is also a graduated University of Michigan, and so he has that over Senator Whitmer, who went to Michigan State, which DJ Yacoral likes that about her as well. But if it wasn't for us knowing her, I would probably be voting for Sayeed myself. So, what else is going on this early in the race? Well, they've already started to go after each other to some degree, at least Thanedar and El Sayeed. Thanedar basically challenged Sayeed's voter registration in the state of Michigan. He basically said that he was living in New York as late as 2011 and was registered in the state of New York, and that he didn't think that El Sayeed had been back in Michigan long enough. Basically, the old carpetbagger argument is what he was making there. Then the Sayeed camp brought up some possible abuses to animals in one of Thanedar's former labs, scientific labs, where they allegedly were possibly working on some cloning type things, and the money went under, the company went under, and they just abandoned the lab and allegedly left all these animals there. Now, I don't know how much that's true, not true, whatever, but it just goes to show that in the early parts of this Democratic primary, you've got probably number 2 and number 3 most likely to possibly win this thing, really going after each other and kind of going after each other hard. Now, Senator Whitmer wisely kind of stayed out of this and just kind of went about her business, making her stops all across Michigan, and really didn't mention anything about either one of them in terms of eligibility to run, or the piece about Thanedar and possibly leaving those animals when that lab went under. Now, Thanedar did hit Whitmer, though, because he basically tried to say she should drop out of the race, because she was the prosecutor of Ingham County at the very, very beginning of some of the Larry Nassar allegations, and of course she said that her office was ready to prosecute if Michigan State campus police or East Lansing police, anybody would have gotten information to them, which she was ready to prosecute on that. But basically what happened was they sent the information, instead of sending it to her office in the Ingham County prosecutor's office, they sent it to the state attorney general's office. And I guess the rationale behind why that happened was because some of these incidents happened in other counties other than just Ingham, so it was sort of a statewide type of thing, is why it went to the Attorney General's office. So she says her office was ready to prosecute, but they never got the information from the police because it went to the Attorney General's office. So you got Thanedar taking a shot at Abdul Sayeed. You got Thanedar taking a shot at Whitmer, saying she should drop out of the race, which is kind of ludicrous considering she's been the front runner since this thing started. And then you have Sayeed at least shooting back after Thanedar accused him of not being eligible to vote about the possibility of those labs. Now, this race is actually, to me, for political junkies like me, kind of exciting because, you know, one, the whole state's ready to get rid of Snyder, so that can't come soon enough. And then the fact that you have some pretty good candidates on the Democratic side who are out there and who are running makes this kind of exciting, like when Obama and Hillary were running the first time around in 2008. So, you know, most of the money that Senator Whitmer's raised has came from small donors, similar to how Bernie Sanders did it in the presidential election. She's got very little corporate money, although there has been a little bit of corporate money. And Thanedar's basically put up his own money because he's a millionaire. And, you know, another reason why he might be leading early is because he's offering proposals like legalizing marijuana, raising minimum wage to $15 an hour, and universal health care, to name a few. Now, El Sayeed is also talking about universal health care, and I think that's something that Senator Whitmer would also support. I guess Senator Whitmer was at Hash Bash in Ann Arbor, so she too is supporting the legalization of marijuana, which should make all my hippie friends very happy. So I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot of difference policy-wise between the three of them, other than the fact that Whitmer's been there, done that in the House of Representatives as state senator and as Senate minority leader. So she's kind of got the experience in government and fighting for Michigan families, where the other two were kind of in the private sector and now trying to play catch-up.
Our father came to America with just $20 and a dream. After our mother died, he raised us as a single dad. A scientist, Shri Thanedar built small businesses that created jobs. He stood up to big banks and drug companies. He believes in single-payer healthcare, outlawing for-profit charter schools, and not taking a penny from corporate special interests. The most progressive Democrat for governor, our father, Shri Thanedar.
This is the most precious place on earth, where we put our little bundles of joy and plan the best future we can imagine for them. This is where we'll put our own bundle of joy. And we couldn't be more excited. I'm Abdul.
And I'm Sarah. As we get ready for our baby and worrying about 10 fingers and 10 toes, there's something else that worries us.
Because for the past 7 years, every precious child across Michigan has been let down by failed leaders. They put lead in our water, let jobs disappear, and did nothing as poison leaked into our air and into our politics. That's unacceptable, and that's why I'm running for governor. I've been surrounded by Michigan kids my whole life. I grew up here, became a doctor, and when I took over Detroit's health department, I saw firsthand just how many kids our leaders in Lansing had let down. But we got to work. We worked to lower infant mortality rates, forced corporations to cut their emissions. We enrolled thousands into Obamacare and provided free glasses for every child who needed a pair. What I learned is that leadership only starts when we choose to believe. When we believe we can move beyond the politics that tell us that corporate money matters more than real people. We believe we can move beyond the cynicism that has divided us. And we believe in the idea and the promise of Michigan. And if we are willing to reach across these divides, if we're willing to touch hands on something that is far greater than we are, our shared future, I know that there are solutions that we can push forward. My wife, Sarah, she's pregnant with our first daughter. And that baby girl, she's gonna be this ethnically half Egyptian, half Indian, 100% American woman. And I ask myself about the kind of world that she deserves, the kind of place that we together have to build for her. But that future that she's gonna live, the future that you all are gonna hand off to your children, that future is ours for the building. If we're willing to recognize that it needs us, that in fact the only way we will build it is if we do it together. All of us, all 10 million strong in this state. And we have that here. Let's go get it. Thank you.
Now, I'm no stranger to tough fights, and I have zero patience for people that want to play politics instead of solve problems. When my colleagues in the Senate asked me to come in and be their leader in a sea of Republicans in the state government, I took it on.
We were sent to Lansing to create jobs, not dismantle them.
When governors from both parties tried to take money out of the school aid fund, I took them on.
This bill does nothing to counteract the unprecedented $2 billion that's been slashed from our public schools in the last 3 years.
And when the whole Republican establishment decided to lock the people out of the Capitol, we threw open the doors to the Capitol and led the resistance from my office.
Gretchen Whitmer, the Senate Democratic leader.
Make some noise because I guarantee they can hear you in there.
I never went out of my way looking for a fight, but I never backed down from a tough one either. Because I know that when it's government that shuts the people out, it sure as heck isn't government that's working for us. It's been a long time since Michiganders have had someone in their corner. I am ready to work with everyone who wants to solve a problem, and I'll take on anyone who stands in our way.
This is about people. We took an oath that we would do what's best for the future of Michigan and not let politics get in our way.
Let us show the world that we will be a state that puts our people first. All of us.
One last thing I want to talk about, and that's because I just had talked about how they sort of went after each other. And that's the idea of oppositional research. And like I said, it's kind of a little early for this to be coming out, but apparently they've done pretty decent oppositional research on each other, as they were able to come out and start swinging mud pretty early. Now, what is oppositional research? It's basically what it sounds like. It's an investigation in the dealings of political opponents, typically in an effort to discredit them publicly. So, that's pretty much the explanation, and that's pretty much what you had going on there when they were taking shots at each other. What a lot of people don't necessarily understand, though, is that during oppositional research, or a part of oppositional research, I should say, that the average person maybe doesn't realize is that campaigns also investigate themselves. And this is useful because then you can see where you're vulnerable, and you can see where your opponents might come after you as things get closer to the actual voting. The use of this information can help you head off attacks and counterattack in a quicker manner, and it's basically just a way to kind of be able to get out in front, get out ahead of potential problems, roadblocks, if you will, that your campaign could run into along the way. So right now, everybody's filed, the race is on, the ads are coming, the commercials are coming. I know we're all going to get sick of these commercials probably by the time we get to August, but the commercials are out, they're on the internet, they're on the television, the candidates are racing across the state of Michigan, And come that second week in August, we'll see who the Democratic candidate is going to be as we move forward to the general election in November. So, those are the candidates. Read up. You got about 2 months to make your decision between them if you're going to vote in the Democratic primary. If you're going to vote in the Republican primary, you've also got 2 months to make a decision because that primary will be coming up on the same day. And if you are one of those people, stay tuned as I will bring you the information on the Republican candidates next time. So until then, make sure you do your research, and I don't care who you vote for, but all means, get out and exercise your right to vote. And until then, good riddance.
The official adventures of
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe to the Good Riddance channel on YouTube, man. Yo, do me this favor, man. Look at the way I'm dressed, man. I'm broke, man. Look at that. I got a Muhammad Ali t-shirt on that's like 200 years old, son. You know what I'm saying? Like, I ain't making it out here. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, I copped all that other stuff, all them other podcasts they got listening to. I copped them. They aight.